Well, it's certainly been a busy couple of weeks in MotoGP land amidst Suzuki confirming their intent to leave the sport at the end of the year. The scoop in the last week, perhaps, that some teams have been breaking the tyre pressure rules. We'll have a bit of chat on that. We've also had a Grand Prix, Le Mans, and for the third time this season, Enea Bastianini rose to the occasion to take the win, the most of any so far this year. The recording date is Tuesday, the 17th of May. My name is Harry Benjamin. Joining me as ever is Crash MotoGP editor Pete McLaren and former Grand Prix rider and British champion Keith Huewen. Hello, gents. Nice to see you again. We're a bit late this week. Sorry about that. But Keith, you've been busy over the weekend up in Ireland. How was all of your Northern Ireland trip?
Well, you're going to find out as soon as I start speaking. I've got no throat left. I've got a stinking cold. I'm absolutely hanging. It's got to be said.
Sign of a good weekend.
It was a very, very good weekend in Northern Ireland. The Northwest 200. We hadn't had a meeting there for 3 years, so it was whiz bang. You'll be able to read it all on Crash, I'm sure, because there were lots of very controversial things that happened in Northern Ireland this weekend, and plenty of inquests going on right now about it. But from an overall event point of view, an absolute cracker. It always is. I mean, I partner Steve Parrish in commentary for the first time in years and years and years, so you can guarantee a good laugh with that reprobate. It's always quite good fun with him. But of course, it was a funny feeling for me because I really enjoy being in the Northwest. It's the first international I ever won, incidentally. But I've always got one eye on my phone for MotoGP. It's bloody annoying because you're focused. And it's such a different style of everything. Road racing compared with MotoGP is just so massively different. But some of the things that are very similar, and we're going to be going there with tyres in a minute, obviously major tyre issues in the Northwest 200, and it's a controversy in MotoGP at the moment. And Aleix hasn't done a deal yet and spitting tax at the moment. That's the news of the moment, isn't it? He's proper not happy. I don't know why that should be. That might be... Is that a little bit of arrogance from Aprilia in that they're thinking that Aleix isn't a top rider and so therefore they're hanging on because they might be able to sign someone they think is better than him? I think they're making a mistake if they're thinking that, because I think Aleix has made the step. We always talk about the step, don't we, in any racing class? Who's making the step, whether it be the chassis, the motor, the rider, the team generally. And I think Aleix has genuinely made a step since he took that win. I mean, 3 podiums in the last 3 races. He's there all the time. The bike looks good. He looks really good on it. I think they're being slightly disrespectful in not sorting out a deal for him personally.
And he clearly makes the difference, doesn't he? Because you look at the other side of the garage, and Viñales is not there.
Yeah, I think it's not a bad point, Harry, but I think Maverick Viñales is one of those talents that's a bit innate. It's not going anywhere at the moment, is it? I mean, I don't know what is going to bring Maverick back to where we expect him to be. It's he's a super motorcycle racer, but he just doesn't seem to find that sweet spot that's good for him. And at the end of the day, he's the one that's going to get dropped. Where's he going to go? I mean, the rider market, we've talked about it already. The rider market is financially has tanked because we've got Rins and Mir that are both out there, and bloody hell, good weekend for them, wasn't it, Suzuki? Yeah. But they're out there on the rider market now. You've got Aleix that's obviously not happy with what's being said and done. Will somebody take a punt and move him across somewhere? You've got the situation that it's a really interesting jigsaw puzzle at the moment to see who goes where. And it's all really going to be held up by what happens to the Suzuki slots on the grid. Who gets them? That's the big talking point, and we're not going to hear about that. I said it ages ago that will be done behind closed doors. It's not the Japanese way to air their laundry in public. They will be doing that deal with Dorna, whatever it costs, whatever the negotiation is between them. You can be fairly sure it will come out. If not amicably, it will come out quietly, and the slots will be available to whoever bids for them at the end of the day. Maybe Aprilia, hopefully Aprilia, and that kind of rules out maybe that's why they're holding back at the moment. They can't spend too much money on Aleix because it will be money. They can't spend too much money on Aleix because they might be looking for 2 more slots, and so the little Noali factory is going to have to stump up a load more, team members and factory production to make 4 motorcycles, which actually means 8 at the end of the day because you've got 2 each. So that's quite a lot of extra engineering that's going on there.
It does definitely sound like Aprilia are talking to other teams about next year. We did hear from Dorna that they'd be quite happy to keep the team numbers the same for next year, because it is a bit early. If a new manufacturer was going to come in, and we heard this from the Aprilia boss Rivola on the weekend, he was saying he's not sure that Dorna want to replace a manufacturer, Suzuki, with a satellite team, but that doesn't sort of close the door on having two more Aprilias, because the RNF team, their contract with Yamaha is only 1 year, and it finishes obviously at the end of this season, but the decision on next year needs to be made pretty much around now. And so it does seem like that could be an option, that they might go with Aprilia instead. So whatever happens with the Suzuki grid slots, we could still see two more Aprilias.
Don't you remember Yamaha saying, you will remember because I know you're cleverer than me, but that the engineering forward planning starts in June. So you're absolutely bang on it, Pete, when it comes to that. I remember that if Yamaha were going to provide two more motorcycles, two as it was, the Sepang International Circuit team, they needed to know what they were doing in June to get that engineering in place to provide the bikes for the start of testing at the beginning of the new year. So you're bang on. A decision needs to be around now. Quite hectic.
Questions that have come in on this worth mentioning to you at the moment. On this, David Murray asks, are others going to look at what's happening at the moment with Suzuki and the superbike market, which I know we've spoken about in the last a couple of shows, it seeming is down. It looks like the sport's a bit shaky at the moment. Are others going to join?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? That's where I said the Sexit comment. I mean, people laughed at that, but if you actually look at it in a bit more depth rather than in a jokey manner, I mean, it is a Brexit situation. Like Europe want to punish the UK, or not punish, but they want to make it more difficult for the UK to be successful, purely and simply because any other, dispossessed region might want to try and do the same thing. And then Europe falls apart. Well, the same thing applies in a much lesser manner, obviously, to MotoGP. If suddenly you can break a contract that you've only just signed for 5 years, just because you suddenly look at your books and think, oh dear, this ain't looking too good. Dorna's whole business model is blown completely out of the water. Like Dorna, that is a company, that is a big deal. They have brought MotoGP to where it is, and they have invested absolutely millions and millions and millions and millions, probably billions of pounds over the period of time into making this sport what it is. So suddenly Suzuki renege on a deal, they've got to pay. I would think that Dorna are going to make it difficult for them, and therefore they're also going to be making it difficult for every other team that might want to suddenly change what they've agreed to. You can't just slither out of a deal just because suddenly it doesn't suit you. Yeah, there are going to be some things like wars and so on that are probably classed as some kind of force majeure, I suppose. But some contracts don't have force majeure in it anymore. I'm not a legal man, so I don't know anything too much about that. But in the past, if some exceptional circumstances came up, you could slither out of a contract. Is Suzuki in exceptional circumstances? Does the war in Ukraine, albeit that we can see that we're going to all have aggravation come a few years' time because of the war in Ukraine, is that a valid excuse for Suzuki dumping their contract? You alluded to it a minute ago, Harry, with the road bike situation. You're absolutely bang on it right. The old adage of win on a Sunday, sell on a Monday is out the window because sports bikes aren't selling. There's some beauties out there and wonderful motorcycles, but Suzuki don't. Their range is a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? Slightly older, I think. Really, slightly more jaded, perhaps, than some of the other manufacturers at the moment, and they've obviously looking to go in a different direction. And I think that's going to happen across all of the manufacturers. They're looking at different styles of motorcycles. Sports bikes are not the big sellers as they were in the past. It's got to have a knock-on effect eventually. Is MotoGP the hotbed of development? Can they convert what they learn from a MotoGP into an endurance bike or into a off-road machine or into slightly more customizable platforms? I don't know. I mean, it's something the factories will know for sure, and they'll all be looking at it. But it's Suzuki who's jumped first, and you wonder, getting back to your original question, whether anyone else will be wanting to do the same thing, despite them all, I think, having signed quite long contracts.
Well, Pete, go
I was
on.
just going to say, Harry, perhaps does this link in with what we've just been talking about, and potentially Yamaha cutting back to only 2 bikes and a factory team? I mean, we were all asking why is the M1 not really been developed for this year? What was going on during the technical freeze? Maybe there was a freeze on their budgets. Maybe the whole COVID situation in Japan was a lot more serious than we realized. We're now seeing the effects at Suzuki. Does that explain why the Yamaha appears to be pretty much unchanged? And now we've got these rumors about, will there even be a satellite Yamaha team next year? So the question is absolutely a valid one. And I think you've got to be concerned that others might at least take a look at what Suzuki has done and gone, would that be right for us as well?
We are going to be on the end of the information trail, Pete. That's all I can say. We're going to be reacting to this rather than be proactive regarding the announcement. So there's a lot going on at the moment in the world generally. I mean, we're not in a particularly good place, are we? I think with things generally. I mean, I don't want to be a doom and gloom, master, but I think there's a few things that are going to be changing over the next year or two, and it ain't going to be easy for a lot of big commercial firms, I feel.
No,
we should say that there has been an official announcement from Suzuki since we last spoke. It did eventually come out just on the Thursday at Le Mans that, of course, it says that they're planning, or it wasn't that we are definitely leaving, because of course they need to find this agreement with Dorna that Keith was talking about. But be under no illusions. I mean, they thanked the team and the supporters. I mean, it's clear that they are going, but they couldn't state that publicly yet until they reached this agreement with Dorna.
The Japanese hate this kind of stuff. They hate having stuff out in the open. It's not, they like things to be privately done and properly done in business. I mean, this will be excruciating for them.
The other question that we have coming off this, and I know we were talking briefly a minute ago about Aprilia might want to replace those slots that Suzuki leave. Somebody's asked, I wonder what the probability of Triumph putting together a Grand Prix team is in the future. They supply obviously all the Moto2 engines and have also been putting some nice sports bikes on the market lately as well. Is it something that they might be considering, Keith?
It's quite romantic, isn't it? It's a wonderfully romantic kind of, not a bloody chance. The amount of money, the amount of money you've got to put into developing a MotoGP bike to the level that they're at the moment is just, I can't imagine John Bloor signing that one off, that's for sure. I mean, any more than I can see Kawasaki coming back, any more than I can see BMW coming in. What it would have to take is a sea change I can see Triumph, if they wanted to enter into a series that might be more relevant for them, would be World Superbikes. But, production-based bikes. It's a funny thing, isn't it? Production-based bikes, when you look at it, at the weekend at the Northwest 200, which is representative of road bikes at the end of the day. It's on a road, it is road bikes. You've got the super stock bikes that are doing over 200 miles an hour. And they're like a fraction of the cost of a super bike.
Jeez,
quite a lot on the road. People are using super stock bikes rather than super bikes. Purely and simply, they're more manageable. They're certainly a lot cheaper. And they're nearly as fast. I mean, I think we were 206 miles an hour for a super bike around the Northwest, and I think there were 100 and nearly. I think it was 2. I think somebody did touch 200 in a slipstream on a super stock bike. It's remarkable stuff that you've got, but then you've got to kind of put that in perspective. They're road bikes. They are available to ordinary people. They shouldn't be allowed. It's just crazy. You got a 200 mile an hour motorcycle with very few tweaks in the hands of people that I'll say it, can't ride them. Peter Hickman, most people are not when it comes to riding on the road. You see it every day. I follow a guy on a big bikes, and you think, does this bloke actually know what he's doing? That's not to insult every road rider there is out there, but these bikes are now so incredibly powerful. You just wonder where the link is the link broken between what is being sold and where MotoGP is going. If that's the case, it's quite worrying for the future.
And just on the manufacturer part, I mean, the time frame in this, I mean, bear in mind that no manufacturers expected Suzuki to leave. No other manufacturer, I mean. So no one was sort of planning, well, we could make a bid for MotoGP here. Okay, now there's potentially an opportunity, but to put a MotoGP program together from nothing in time for next year, impossible, I think. I mean,
Well,
KTM, it was several years, from when they announced they were coming into MotoGP to actually being on the grid. So I think definitely for 23, you just couldn't do it. The only way I can see a new manufacturer, let's say, to put it, in speech marks, is if they do the kind of Moto3 trick with KTM, where they rebrand a bike. You've got the KTM, the Gas, the Husqvarna, the CF Moto. To me, and I think they could do that. Obviously, it would still technically be a KTM, but would that count as the new kind of constructor? I think that's the only way it could be done. An existing machine. Obviously, the Suzukis, if someone was somehow able to take over that project, that would be another way of doing it. But I think the time frame is just too short, definitely for 23. Maybe someone could buy the grid slots and enter in 24 or something. But to answer the question, I think certainly if any new manufacturer comes in, I just can't see they could get a project up and running. And bear in mind, pitching a MotoGP project now, as Keith mentioned, in this economic climate, you imagine going to the board. Hey guys, I've got an idea.
It's going to cost you.
Yeah, not an easy one.
No, not an easy one. Well, so that's the triumph. Dreams dashed. Sorry for whoever sent in that question. I've lost your name. But on that, it might be worth moving on to a bit of Moto2 action. We'll come back to some more MotoGP in a moment.